I guess you can see me and hear me. That's not quite the screen I was expecting to see, but it's good to see you all, and glad you could join us. My name is Jeff Bentley. I'm the facilitator for this course on the toolbox for working with root, tuber, and banana crops. And just want to start by showing you this presentation on housekeeping. So first of all, the videos and microphones will be off for the participants, so you cannot turn on your microphone. The session is being recorded. Unlike last time, we do not have a special question and answer device. So just use the chat to post your questions and comments. And then at the end of the presentation, during the question and answer session, the teams will answer the questions. We have simultaneous translation available from English to Spanish and English to French. So use the interpretation button if you want to hear the translation. And that's it. So now, or maybe I wasn't sharing at all, I don't know. But next we're going to hear from Vivian Pollard. Vivian is the Gender and Innovation Specialist for the research program on roots, tubers, and bananas, and she's based at SIP. And we're very delighted to have Vivian with us at what's an early hour for her.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm trying to share my screen. Please let me know if it's shared and if you can see it in projection mode.
We can see it.
All right. Thank you so much and welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's a pleasure for me to be here on and give you a few words to start off this webinar on behalf of Dr. Graham Teal, the Roots, Tubers, and Banana CRP, and the entire RTB team. So welcome to our webinar. The Roots, Tubers, and Banana program works globally to harness the untapped potential of RTB crops to improve food security, nutrition, income, climate change, resilience, and gender equality for smallholder farmers. As you can see, root, tubers, and bananas covers several crops that have many elements in common: bananas, cassava, potato, sweet potato, yam, and many other smaller RTB crops. Why the bulk of RTB crops all together, brought together? Because they have a genetic complexity that is common to all of them that makes it challenging to achieve genetic gains improvement. They are vegetatively propagated, thus they have similar seed systems. They're perishable, they're bulky, their post-harvest and value chain options are different and challenging. Moving material from one place to the other becomes complex. Thus, the elements of the seed system are, of course, different also. To address all the challenges that these crops face, the RTB program has developed several golden eggs. These are assets of innovations and processes that allow RTB crops to flourish. All of these innovations have been curated into what we call the RTB Golden Eggs. We should call not necessarily probably the eggs, but the seed, because the eggs reflect what is a seed, right? So the RTB Golden Eggs are contributing to one CGIAR in multiple areas, in different areas of work. We have some of them working in systems transformation. Some of them operate in resilient agri-food systems. Others cover genetic innovation as a whole. One important golden egg from this set, from this basket, is the seed system toolbox. And we as a team are extremely proud of it and are happy to share its elements with you and share some of the work in this webinar. We're, of course, also very grateful to our major donors contributing to the Golden Egg and to the work of the Seed System Toolbox and team as a whole. With that said, I thank you all for joining us today, and we wish you the very best and a lot of learning and interaction, and of course, sharing of knowledge around the Seed System Toolbox. Thank you.
Thank you, Viviane, for that warm welcome. Now, I'm going to share my screen and show you a brief couple of slides. There we go. This is the program for the event. There we go. Right. So let's just review quickly what we've done so far. This course is a capacity strengthening for partners who are using the toolbox to understand and improve seed systems. Now, we had a seminar or a webinar in July where we were fortunate enough to have the tool owners present all of the tools. And at the end of that event, we formed 3 teams in Uganda, Tanzania, and Ethiopia, and each one of them applied one or more tools in the field. And they did that. They've been doing that since July, and they've been. And so this week we'll hear from them. So we'll be hearing today from Uganda. Unfortunately, Professor Nelson Tutihabwe will not be able to join us. We'll also hear from Nicolina Dehan. From Tanzania on Wednesday, we'll hear from Enrico Golembeka, also from Fetian Abera. And on Thursday, we'll hear from the team in Ethiopia, and we'll also hear from the discussants Taye Tadese and David Spielman. Each day, we also have a special speaker who will be introducing a topic of interest. So we have James Legg today. We have Lawrence Kent on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, we have Carlo Fada and Ian Barker. And on Thursday, we also have a graduation ceremony. So that's it that's the program. We're also going to record this, and it will be the recorded presentations will eventually be available online so you can see them. Next, we're going to hear from the Uganda team. They have worked with 2 crops, cassava and bananas. They've also used two methods. So if we could cue up their presentation now, let's listen to Uganda.
A good day to everyone. We take the pleasure to share with the audience our results and experiences resulting from real-life field conditions in application of 2 of the tools from the RTB Toolbox. Specifically, we explored the banana and cassava seed systems in the central part of Uganda. We are a team of 6 people comprising Lucy Mulugo, Basil Mugonola, Emmanuel Ngolobe, Evans Nakoko, Samuel Kalimunjai, and Enoch Mutebi Chikulwe. The agriculture sector in Uganda is majorly dominated by smallholder farmers, and they farm less than 2 hectares of land, contributing to 70% of agricultural production in the country. Most of the agricultural produce in Uganda is consumed domestically, and agricultural production is mainly rain-fed in 2 seasons a year. The first season stretches from March to June, and the second rain season is from September to December, and this is mainly for areas around the Lake Victoria Basin. Cassava as a crop is grown in most agroecological zones of the country, mainly in the eastern part, the northern, central, and to a little extent the southwestern regions. On the other hand, banana is majorly grown in the southwestern parts, central, as well as some areas in the east. Agriculture is key for development in Uganda as a country, but in spite of this sector only meets 40% of its potential. Productivity is impeded by a number of factors, which range from pests and diseases, climatic change impacts, farmer limited access to quality inputs, to mention but a few. World over, it's been shown that agricultural technology improvements in form of innovations like tissue culture offer and have potential solutions for farmers to aid them increase crop productivity. And in Uganda, we have private sector actors and research institutions that have come up and taken up tissue culture as a technology, multiplying and distributing cassava and banana plantlets as sources of clean planting materials to farmers. But we find that in spite of all these efforts, farmer use of this important technology has been shown to be low. Therefore, as a team, we set out to understand farmers' underlying motivations in selection of planting materials for both banana and cassava crops, the purpose for which is to inform future work on uptake of clean planting materials for root tube and banana crops, spatially and temporarily. In our context, the spatial dimension is in light of the geographic concentration of tissue culture laboratories in the central part of Uganda, whilst the temporal dimension emanates from the continuous release of varieties, especially for cassava.
We conducted the study in central Uganda, where cassava and banana are grown for both commercial purposes and domestic consumption by the locals there. The two sub-counties of Bamnanika and Zirowe were purposely selected for this purpose. The specific villages where we conducted this study include Bondo village and Nkuluze village. We conducted the study in central Uganda. For this study, we used two special methods, the 4-square method and the means-end chain analysis. I'll first explain the 4-square method that we used, that we first employed. There were 8 focus group discussions that were held. 2 of the focus group discussions were comprised of men. The other 2 were women. And we did this for each of the crops, and that explains the total of 8 focus group discussions. There were a total of 74 farmers. 33 of these were banana farmers, and 41 were cassava farmers. The breakdown in terms of the 33 banana farmers, we had 17 male farmers and 16 female farmers. For the cassava farmers, 24 of these were male and 17 were female. We then requested the farmers to identify with each of the quadrants that we have in the 4-square method. We asked the farmers to identify those varieties that were grown by many households in a large area. The farmers were then asked to identify those varieties that are grown by a few households but on a large area. We asked farmers to also identify those varieties that were grown by many households but in a smaller area. Finally, we asked the farmers to identify those varieties that were grown by few households in a small area. The second method that we used during this study was the means-end chain analysis. And this leveraged on the laddering process as we conducted the interviews. 50 individual interviews were therefore held, and 25 of the people interviewed were banana farmers, and the other 25 were cassava farmers. We premised the choice of the two tools on their complementarity. For example, as we conducted the focus group discussions using the Foursquare method, we were able to identify the varieties as indicated by the farmers. We then got to understand the uses. We then dug deeper and understood those attributes that were desirable for the farmers and those that were not desirable. Through this entire process, we laid firm ground for us to be able to now use the means-end chain analysis method to then understand the underlying motivations by the farmers for selection of banana and cassava planting materials in the study communities.
So, looking at the diversity of banana varieties, 80% of all mentioned varieties belonged to the endemic East African highland bananas, Musa species, AAEA groups. So the varieties belong to the 5 major clonal sets, locally known as Mbide, Musakala, Nachitembe, Mfuka, and Nakabululu. So respondents identified 27 local and 3 introduced varieties. The introduced varieties included FIA 17, FIA 25, and KM5. So some varieties, though local or indigenous, were reintroduced as tissue culture. Were reintroduced as tissue culture plantlets. So, looking at the Foursquare analysis for banana varieties, abundance and year of introduction, the study established that fewer varieties were grown by fewer households on large scale, while most varieties, mostly local, were grown by many households on small scale. The study also established that men have land ownership rights and therefore grow varieties on large scale and mainly for cash, while women with limited land grow cooking varieties on small scale for food. So the study further established that women grow more varieties than men, with men growing more of market-demanded varieties such as Mpologoma, Chibuzi, Mbwazirume, and the brewing varieties, while women concentrate mainly on varieties that are meant to supply food to the household. So, though the brewing varieties are grown by few households on small scale, they're important for men. So previously, the brewing varieties were mainly used as a source of beer that was used in local ceremonies, parties, basically for men to socialize. However, with the resurgence or the emergence of new brands of alcohol on the market, such as wines, spirits, men have gone for more industrial brands. However, despite the emergence of new brands of alcohol, the brewing varieties have remained a preserve of the cultural values, especially during the performance of marriage ceremonies. In the study area, it came out as an outstanding finding that local beer made from the brewing varieties is a prerequisite for any man who is marrying somebody's daughter. So locally it is termed as a door opener, implying that it is the first present that is delivered to the family or to the household of the girl before any marriage ceremony is conducted, and therefore men have preserved these brewing varieties though on small scale, but basically for the cultural functions. The diversity of cassava varieties, the study established that 83% of the varieties were fresh cooking type, while 17% were the bitter type. So by bitter type, we mean or we refer to cassava varieties that can only be eaten after passing through a preparation or a process of preparation, which process includes fermenting, sun drying, and then milling into flour before consumption. So out of the 23 varieties that were mentioned, 2 were local while 22 were improved. So the study established that farmers usually adopt newly introduced cassava varieties based on desirable attributes at the expense of previously introduced varieties or varieties that existed previously. From the four-square analysis for cassava varieties, abundance and year of introduction, fewer varieties were grown by few households on large scale, while majority of the varieties were grown by fewer households on small scale. So in the study area or study community, it was established that cassava is highly perceived as a woman's crop, and as such, women grow more varieties as compared to men. Though women grow more varieties compared to men, the study established that men majorly grow bitter varieties, especially those with commercial attributes on large scale for cash, while women with limited land grow fresh cooking varieties on small scale, mostly for food. It is very important to understand that the community in which the study was conducted has a patrilineal It has a patrilineal system whereby men own land while women have user rights. And because men own land, they have access to huge chunks of land for production, while women are left to have access or to use small plots of land for the production of food. So in the next section, we look at the farmer preferred traits for banana. So farmer practices in banana cultivation are not only subject to food and nutritional needs, but also finance, food security, traditional rules and beliefs. Therefore, in making decisions and choices over which varieties to plant, farmers assess the quality of a specific banana variety before they introduce it to their farms. So, looking at the important traits for bananas as considered by male and female farmers in the respective focus group discussions, the study established that men mainly prefer high-yielding and market-demanded varieties that produce fewer suckers, basically to maintain the large bunch sizes that are highly preferred by consumers, and also to reduce on the workload associated with management practices in the field. This is in association with the size of the mats. For example, uh, the fewer the suckers, the lower the cost of management and the ease to manage the suckers on a mat as compared to the suckering varieties that produce a lot of suckers, yield small bunches, but also increase on the labor cost associated with managing the farms. However, contrary to the men's preference, the study established that women preferred high suckering varieties. For example, Nakabululu, Nakinyika, Mkubya Konde. However, the varieties, though high suckering, women prefer them for specific reasons. That is to say, these varieties have perceived good food qualities or attributes such as softness, yellowness. They also have low sap content, but above all, they are also considered to be medicinal, especially in the nutritional cycle of the rural households. Besides this, these varieties also, though they yield smaller bunches, they also yield multiple bunches on the same mat, implying that there is a continuity of food on a mat throughout the year, as compared to the varieties that are preferred by male that yield only fewer bunches, say one or two in the production cycle. So in terms of farmer preferred traits for cassava, farmers maintain a diversity of cassava varieties because of the multiple end uses. Diversity in strengths and weaknesses reduces consumption and marketing risks. This is in terms of, let's say, farmers produce specific varieties for specific purposes. For example, if they know this variety matures within 6 months, it means that such a variety will be preferred purposely for food security, that is the immediate food needs of the household. And if they realize specific variety can mature and stay longer in the soil, say for close to 2 years, still it is considered for the long-term food needs of the household. So this implies that for early maturing varieties, they can cover up the immediate food needs or early food needs of the household, as well as the financial needs of the households within the short term. While varieties that mature and at least can sustainably or have good keeping quality in the soil for longer periods can really meet or are basically grown to meet the long-term both financial and food needs of the households, implying that the farmers produce or are able to produce specific varieties to meet all their needs. So still under diversity, Uh, though some varieties are low yielding, however, these can be retained still on farms because of other superior traits. And among these, this could be good taste. Besides good taste, it could be pest and disease resistance or income values. Still on important traits for cassava considered by male and female farmers in the respective focus group discussions. The study established that men mainly grow cassava for commercial purposes, so they prefer varieties that suppress weeds or varieties that have high vegetative growth to reduce the cost of production. While women prefer less vegetative varieties because women intercrop cassava with other food crops such as maize, beans, basically to supplement the food needs of the household. So women grow multiple varieties that mature at different periods to complement the food needs of the households, and this is the core reason why they prefer the less bushy or less vegetative varieties as compared to their male counterparts. So the second last section present results of the means end chain analysis that led to the production of the aggregated hierarchical value maps for male and female cassava farmers. This is a product of individual interviews that were conducted in the field. So the study established that 4 major characteristics motivate farmers to grow cassava, and these include the high yield, good quality tubers, early maturity, and resistance to pests and diseases. The most important attribute was high yield. Various consequences or mental consequences were mentioned, with earning income being the most important consequence. This implies that farmers are highly motivated by the high yield of the cassava varieties, basically to earn high incomes, leading to success and overall happiness in life as the end goal for the production of cassava. And therefore, generally the study established that farmers are mentally motivated by happiness and successes in life, when it comes to choosing a specific variety of cassava to grow or cultivate on the farm. Moving forward to bananas, an aggregated hierarchical value map for male and female banana farmers, still from in-video interviews using the means end chain analysis, was also established. And the study revealed that three major characteristics motivate farmers to grow bananas, and these include early maturity of the variety, high yield, and the quality or good quality of the variety. So the most important attributes were high yield and good food quality of the variety. So banana farmers grow high yielding and good food quality varieties to earn more income uh, in order to meet the family needs so as to be recognized in society and be happy. So from the study, it was established that community or self-recognition in society and happiness were the end values that farmers consider, especially when they are selecting the specific banana variety to grow or cultivate on the farm.
Let me take you through the conclusions and implications for this study. So we found out that there is a high diversity in banana varieties on farm, with the women growing more varieties than men. So the implication of this is that to increase adoption of banana varieties, especially among women, breeders need to factor this in, the diversity and their preferred attributes in their breeding program. Though cassava is considered a female crop, men prefer high-yielding varieties with consumer-preferred traits because mostly men are dealing with varieties which are sold to the market. So in this way, intervention needs to put into consideration male and preferences to foster uptake. Farmers must produce high-yielding cassava and banana varieties to be counted successful in their respective community and to lead to be happy in life. So, if a variety doesn't meet the success and the happiness expected by the farmer, it will be docked, especially among the cassava farmers. So, this is also something which needs to be factored in while we think of uh, producing new technologies in such communities. For banana, if a cultivar doesn't meet the full requirements, especially among improved varieties or commercial or cultural needs, for instance, to brew beer for weddings, which is common among the local varieties, it is dropped and becomes extinct. So there is a high variety turnover in cassava than in banana due to high degeneration rate caused by cassava streak virus disease in the community. So cassava farmers frequently replace old varieties with new ones. The variety is currently grown between 2 to 3 years versus 7 years in the past. This has an implication for the breeders with relation to cassava, seed availability, affordability, and quality, because it seems like every 2 years these farmers have to restock. So if the variety, there is no new variety within the community, it will be hard for productivity or production of this crop in such communities. I would like to acknowledge the following. First, I will acknowledge the funding which was given to us to undertake this study by the CRP, roots, tubers, and bananas, and supported by CGR fund donors. I would also like to thank Julius Okello for his time, knowledge, and willingness to train the team on how to conduct laddering interviews for the means and chain analysis. It was not so easy, but at least he was able to take us through to make sure that we understand how data is collected, is some coded and analyzed. Lastly, I would like to thank the banana and cassava farmers in the communities which we visited for their time, their kindness, and the knowledge they shared with us. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thanks to the whole Uganda team for that excellent presentation. We are running just a little bit ahead of schedule. So let me just remind you once again, if anyone has a question, please write it into the chat. And then later during the question and answer session, I will facilitate those questions to the Uganda team. So unfortunately, Professor Nelson was not able to join us today. So we're going to move ahead to our a discussion with Nicolina de Haan. Nicolina, if you're ready. Nicolina is the director of the CGIAR gender platform, and we're delighted to have her with us. We hear you loud and clear. Yes,
Perfect.
we hear you.
And can you see my screen?
Yes, we see it.
Perfect. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity. As was mentioned by Jeff, I am the director of the CGIAR gender platform. As part of the platform, we work across all the CGIAR centers, all the agriculture research institutes to really understand gender in many forms, in many ways, across many crops, but also across water, livestock. And so for me, I'll be honest, cassava or bananas are not my forte, but I really appreciate being asked to look at this, especially also from the seed system, but especially from the gender perspective, because I think this is a very important area. So as I move through my presentation, please do put in questions as we move forward. So as we said, we're looking at cassava and banana seed system. So I first wanted to start a little bit about why would we even look at something like this? Why would this even be important? And for me, there's two pathways that we always need to look at a lot of these things in agriculture. So one, what is the basic argument being, and it's very what we often call functionalistic, but I think it's still quite important. We know women are very important in agriculture. So if women are so important, they do a lot of labor in agriculture. Why don't we make sure we understand their needs and make sure they get the right tools to do agriculture better? It improves agriculture for all of us. So I think that's a very important way of looking at how we look at gender. Women are part of it, and it's the relationship between women and men in this. So how do we, as a household, also improve agriculture? So that's one way. The other way is also quite important to us is how can we make sure that agriculture actually leads to empowerment of women instead of leading to, for instance, more drudgery, more work, etc. How can we make sure that it's a win-win across a situation? So when you're looking at those two different pathways of going along, you do improve households overall. And I think that's very important to understand as a background to you. And so as we put here, gender relations shape variety and seed preferences, their access, their use, and their outcomes. And as we say here, it really does mediate how farmers access their seeds, which through local and formal sources, but also informal sources. Now, why is this important at some level? Two ways that it's very important, I think, that we do need to highlight. One is uptake of a technology. If we understand it better, we understand why people will do something. And so especially also with, for instance, seeds in this case, how does it fit within that world of the gender relations, and how will that lead to more uptake of a technology? But the other part also is labor implications. If we require some different systems to be put into place because we want people to access a seed or even another technology, what are actually the labor implications? And I want to give a little bit of a diversion, but I think it's a very interesting one, and you can replicate it in probably in cassava and banana systems. The situation we had, I work a lot on gender and livestock. So we had a new vaccine for an animal disease. Wonderful. You vaccinate more animals, you increase your productivity. Great, wonderful. Everybody benefits. But when we started talking to the women, they weren't interested. And we're like, but why aren't the women that interested? Because what happens is that if you vaccinate, you increase productivity. But who takes care of that animal then? It's the women who take the care of the animal. And so if the women have to take care of the animal, do they want much more animals? Sometimes not as much, huh? And on top of that, once the animal gets sold, women often don't get the benefits from it because it's the man who goes to the market and sells it. So what happens then, in my opinion, is that often in cases where there's this discussion between a man and a woman at home at night, what should we do? Should we vaccinate our animals, or should we fund our son to go to school? The woman might argue to fund the son to go to school, so because she knows that in the future that will give her more input. What I'm trying to tell with this story is that some of these gender relations are very complicated, and we do need to go in depth to really understand them. And so that's where, like we say, gender analysis is important for a comprehensive understanding of seed systems, but across agriculture, to design effective and inclusive interventions that go beyond reaching, but also to benefit and empower them. So again, keep that in mind as you move forward. And so that's why, for me, for instance, this whole activity that you're doing is amazing, because once again, you're developing methodologies that allow us to go into this depth of understanding gender relations. So with the means and chain methodology and the Foursquare, in each case, you are starting to understand what the different gender implications, what the different preferences are, and how that is important to us, and how they actually add tools for understanding gender-based constraints, but also for future seed development. So what they add is they provide data and evidence to inform future plans. And part of why I'm so excited is part of the reason we work in the platform is we try to gather all these tools so that everybody across the world can use these tools as they move forward, because we know with gender, it's a relatively young science. And so we don't have as many methodologies as we would like. And so having this again is amazing. And I compliment the organizers for doing this. So then to go into the next level. So you get the data, and then, like we've talked about, and I think the presenters were great in already highlighting some of these issues. If you look at the little slides on the side that were just presented, you can see that the men have fewer, how do you call it, characteristics that they are, and the women have more. And that's often the case, we've noticed, across the world with different things. Women often have more of an expanded vision of where they want this thing to fit, and often have more of a multifaceted objectives across it. And this goes back a little bit, what I'll talk about it in a little bit further, is all this idea of risk. How do different people deal with risk? Whereas for men, there's a relatively straightforward productivity thing. They want increased productivity, which means more income to the family. And that's also how we as society often present these things. So as this project shows, which is again great to see and to actually have the data, because often we do know these things and we intuitively know them, but we need to start filling those databases with evidence, with real good research. And that's what you're doing here. So congratulations again. So what we really see here is that women do have higher diversity in their cultivar. And I think that's very important to look at, because it also sort of puts it a little bit upside down, this whole constant push for productivity gains and how we work with that. So I think that's an important thing that's coming out of this. Then the next one, you will also see, hold on, can you see there? And again, the other part in this, we also notice with why women want it, but it's also because they have different role than men often in these seed systems. For instance, why do women seek more suckers on banana plants than men? What are the implications of this? Why do we need to understand that? Why do men prefer to grow bitter but high-yielding varieties for sale and processing, whereas women prefer sweet varieties for fresh home consumption? Again, quite an important understanding. So again, some of these specific questions then come is, what is the proportion of bitter and sweet varieties? And how will this influence how breeders will respond to this? And I think these are important understandings as we move forward on gender issues in this arena. Now, next critical steps, I did want to move it forward, move what you're doing, because I always think we do need to move some of these discussions forward, is how do we actually better design for systems for equitable outcomes? So we do need to understand the strategic needs of different types of farmers, whether it's women or men, but also more and more, whether it's younger, older, but also richer, poorer, all those different intersecting identities, I think is important. So we need to understand what the individual and the household actually wants. But we also need to understand some of the structural issues that go around it. One of the issues often is that if women don't own land, they have no need to expand because they just can't access. So again, one of those things we need to understand, but can we then move them into something else, as for instance, seed entrepreneurs? The other comment that was made by one of the presenters was, this whole about new varieties that women often don't take it up. This is also a little issue of risk appetite. Do women have the appetite for risk to actually try new varieties? Because if it's a new variety, it might, work out badly, and women often don't have as much resources to fall back on. So again, something that we need to think a little bit more of that depth. The other one I want to highlight, which I was in a meeting earlier today where we were talking more about gender transformative approaches. And it is true that when we talk about trying to understand everybody and trying to include more people in our developing of our technologies, so we will have more update, we do need to appreciate that inclusion is always an intentional choice. If it isn't planned, it will not happen. And I think that's quite important. What this evidence and what this data can show is where can we actually show this intentionality of actually including other people's choices and other people's needs. The other thing I did want to point out is that in a lot of this, what we do have to worry about or think about is that how do we actually empower women with this? And how do we make sure that we don't constantly confirm stereotypes? So what we're doing in a lot of this research is actually describing of how the situation is and saying, well, women want this because they cook. Why are we only talking about what women want because of those roles they have? Why not actually provide much more aspiration of what women can have? And I go back again to, as an example, to livestock. In most of the discussion on gender and livestock, we always talk about women having a few goats and a few chickens. Why don't we talk about women owning cattle? Why is that always our own limitation as we discuss these things? So why can't we just move forward? And again, some of that was mentioned here by, becoming seed entrepreneurs or moving it beyond that stereotype. Well, women cook, so they need better. It is important, but I'm also pushing, as that's part of my role, to actually look beyond those stereotypes that we have. But bottom line is we need more tools like this, and we need more evidence like this. And that's why I do, once again, congratulate the team on doing this work. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nicolina. Also, let me just take this moment to remind you, you can leave questions for either the Uganda team or for Nicolina. So it's usually clear by the context which ones you mean, but it might be helpful to specify. We've got quite a lot of questions already, as you can see in the chat. So with no further ado, what we'll do, I will read the questions. We can take 20 minutes for questions. I'll read the questions, and then someone from the Uganda team can answer those out loud. Then if we don't have time to answer them all, you can also answer them in writing in the chat. So here's our first question from Antoinette Sala. She says, hello, are any farmers, men and women, attending this seminar? Has tissue culture been introduced to women cassava farmers? So I'll leave that. Lucy, do you want to answer that question, or someone else from Uganda would like to answer that question?
Yes, Jeff, someone else can answer it.
Yes, please. Please. Yes, please.
The question is that, thank you, I'm Samuel from Uganda, part of the team. What I have to say, yes, there were both women and men, including the youth. So among the groups that were divided is that we had the youth alone in terms of boys and girls. Then the adults, also we had both the two groups of the men and the women, and they had equal representation, and the views that were presented were both from them.
Yes, and there was the question whether tissue culture was also introduced to the banana farmers.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's very true, because these villages where we went were purposively selected based on the reason that both the male and female farmers, both cassava and banana in these communities, have been introduced. They are aware, for example, of the tissue culture banana varieties, as well as improved cassava varieties. So it's true, they have been exposed to them.
Okay, excellent. Then we have another question from also from Antoinette Sala, who asks, what were the challenges during the research? And Evans Nakoko answered her, also answered her in the chat. I don't think you can all see that, and I'll read what he's written. He says, indeed, there were some challenges spanning from the COVID restrictions that were only starting to ease at the time. During the laddering process, we had to employ many more skills like negative laddering that took a lot more time. We have a question from Muganga Shem, who says, hi team, what are the current cassava varieties? I'm in Uganda. Who'd like to answer that from Uganda?
I can respond. There are varieties, these are names I think given by the farmers. There's a variety they call Narokas. There's one they mentioned called Mama Benita. There's also one called Nigeria. There's another one they called Katidi. These are just some of the examples of varieties that are kind of like trending currently. But there are many more given from the results. There were 23 varieties in total that the farmers in the cassava community grow.
Okay. Then we have another question from Adyanti Costanto, who says, are there any women and men participants of focus group discussions, interviews, or spouses of the same family? Right, that's a good question. So say if a woman is in one focus group discussion, would her husband be in another focus group discussion, or would only one member of each household be in a discussion?
Let somebody else answer it, it's okay.
I think Emmanuel, you wanted to answer that.
Yes, for purposes of getting quality data, we managed to control double responses from household, and in this case, we had a single participant from a household, meaning if the husband participated in the focus group discussion,
the woman or the wife or the spouse would not participate in another focus group discussion. And this was purposely to control the quality of data.
Okay, super. We have a question from Tesfaye Desta. This is a question on the recommendation made on variety turnover. Variety turnover time from the Uganda team. Is it not too short a time even to reach farmers with new varieties in that short time? Forget to supply new varieties of such huge planting material demanding crops like RTB. So that's, I think that's a good question. Is the turnover time of varieties so quick that it's difficult to bulk up and supply the new varieties to get them in the system? Any comments on that from the Uganda team?
That's why in the conclusion, when it came to implications, we noted that that high turnover rate has implication on seed availability, on the affordability, you know, because like the participant has observed, surely 2 years, 2 to 3 years is a short period. So it has a great implication on the breeder's side to make sure that at least within 2 to 3 years, there is seed available. And the question is would it be affordable in the farmer's context? So all these are challenges that have to be worked around.
Okay. We have a question now from Teen Onmarwin, who asks, in our country, Myanmar, banana value-added products and value chain processes are conducted mainly by female farmers. How about in Uganda situation for banana value chain? So in Uganda, who is it who's adding value to bananas? Is it mostly women? So Lucy,
can I answer that?
Yes, please.
Now, the value chain process and value chain players in the banana value chain in Uganda vary with the varieties. For example, adding value for the brewing varieties is basically a role that is customized to men in the farming communities. While when it comes to the cooking varieties, that is customized to the women. So different roles are played differently depending on the variety of the cultivar that is cultivated. So if it is specifically for food, it is women that play play the role in value addition. If it is for beer, it is basically men, just as we mentioned in the results.
Okay, excellent. Right, now we have a question from Wilda Hawariat Asefa, who says, how is the adoption of the newly released varieties and mechanisms of demonstration to producers and end users? So when a new variety is ready to be released, what is the official process? How is that variety made known to the farmers? Lucy, maybe you could answer that. So when a new variety is released, is there a formal process for making the farming public aware that this new variety exists and where they can get it and what are its characteristics?
Yes, that is true. There is a formal process that usually has to be followed. But looking at, there's a recent study that was conducted by one of my colleagues, trying to look at the dynamics as far as farmer uptake and of released banana variety is concerned. And from her study, strongly came out that there was minimal interaction between the breeders, between the extension workers, and also the farmers. There are some stages that were skipped, which ideally should not have been overlooked. So true, there is a formal process, but usually you find that there are guidelines that are skipped in the process, and in one way or another, which influences farmer use or non-use of these improved technologies.
Okay. Our next question from Dawit Segaye Sisai says, having preference differences between males and females might be expected. However, who will make the final decision for varieties to be produced at household level is more important. Can you tell us, if possible, to what extent males dominated in the decision process? What recommendations you might draw from your study? Okay, that's a good point. So if you ask women what their preferences are, but the males dominate in the decision process, then at the household level, then how do you make sure that the women are represented at the end of the day?
Well, in our study, we didn't delve much into the decision-making process at household level. We were just looking at mainly the motivational factors, the underlying motives as to why the farmers choose cassava planting material and also banana planting material. So we didn't delve into the decision-making at household level, because even we just carried out focus group discussions and also had individual interviews. So that's something we didn't delve into for this study.
Okay, fair enough. Nathan, I've lost track a bit of the time, so please stop me when our time's up. Here we have a question from Hillary Mireku Bote, who says, good presentation to Uganda team. I saw the presentation as more of diversity of varieties and traits preferred by farmers instead of the seed system for these crops. What are the sources of planting materials of these crops? Which sector, public or private, is involved in its production and sales? What is the issue of availability, affordability, and access? What is the quality status of these planting materials? These were my expectations. Thank you, Hillary from Ghana, currently in Kenya. So, right. Hillary's asking for a bit more background on the seed system itself. Any response from the Uganda team?
Yes, we thank Hillary for that question pertaining to the seed system in general, to do with the seed sources, affordability, the quality. Yeah, those are pertinent issues, but given the time limit we had, because this study had to be done within a particular time frame, those are aspects that were out of scope for this particular study. Yeah, but nonetheless, there is also literature out there that can give different sources, for example, for banana varieties in Uganda and specifically in the central region. There's some work that has been done. Yeah.
Okay. I'm reading ahead to read the next question. This is from Tesfaye Desta, who says, what such swift multiplication and supply systems of those varieties do you really want to be learned? So I think this might also be a similar question on seed system, which was a bit outside the study, but Lucy and colleagues, you might have a comment on rapid multiplication techniques that might be appropriate for Uganda? If not, any thoughts on rapid multiplication? Basil, go ahead, sir.
Yes, my connection is a bit poor, but my take on that is that the pathway from the research institutions to the farmers involves also other actors along the way. So we have commercial seed companies that are able to actually buy the foundation seed or the early generation seed and then multiply it for onward transmission to the farmers. But there are also progressive farmers that are now coming into the local seed businesses to produce quality declared seed. So the value chain, the seed value chain involves a number of actors from the research stations to the private sector and finally to the farmers. So the number of actors involved, of course, with the Ministry of Agriculture playing a regulatory function to ensure that the quality of seed is not compromised. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that response. Here's a question from Phineas Nturuhunga, who says, Uganda team, I am wondering why farmers should be changing planting materials every 2 years if they are planting improved varieties, which I assume are resistant to pests and diseases. Okay, so why should farmers be changing planting varieties every 2 years if they have improved varieties which are resistant to pests and diseases?
One of the reasons that we noted in the presentation is the fact that most of these varieties are susceptible to the cassava streak disease. And so you find that within this period, most of the degeneration rate is high. And as such, it's important that again, they get another variety.
Yeah, maybe could I also add to what Lucy has said, is that the turnover, the varietal turnover is informed by a number of factors, but majorly the resistance oftentimes breaks down quicker than expected. So these materials, once the resistance has broken down, the farmers are bound to look for something else. But also the other factor is to do with the attributes, the varietal attributes themselves and the market preferences, because they keep changing. So once they change, then the farmers have no choice but to look for something that will satisfy the markets, but also the household's needs. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. We have a question.
Also add on that.
Yes, please.
That besides the attributes and the introduction of new varieties, that the rate at which the dissemination of the varieties is done, you realize that the first year of introduction of a new variety in the farthest local community is related to a high yield, especially when a new variety is introduced in the new community. So what happens is such a community will produce this newly introduced variety, and by the time the community produces it in the second cycle, there is also a new variety being released from the research station, implying that the lag within the dissemination period informs the level of uptake or the period of uptake. So if there is a new variety that has been introduced and is disseminated at a faster rate, the other community that received late the earlier variety will definitely go for the most recent variety, dropping the earlier.
Okay. We have a question from Waruna Kariya Wasam, who says, is the four-square method similar to the diversity wheel tool? And also asks, is there any data recorded on extinct varieties?
Just a small question back to him. What diversity tool is he referring to? And then concerning,
I wondered that myself.
yeah, and then concerning whether there is any data related to varieties that are extinct, yes, we do have it, but because this presentation was limited by time, we did not add some of it, but it's true. There are varieties which were indicated as extinct as of now, for both cassava and even for banana.
Hello, Jeff.
Okay.
Maybe you could take one more question.
Okay, very good. We have a question from James Legg to the Uganda team, who says, very interesting demonstration of varietal degeneration caused by disease and how this contrasts for, oops, I've lost it. And how this contrasts for cassava and bananas. He's actually asked two questions. So yeah. So I think that's a comment more than a question, but he's asked a question. Congratulations on an excellent study. As others have said, there is information generated through this study that would be of great value to the banana and cassava breeding teams in Uganda. Were breeders involved in this work? And if not, is there a mechanism that will allow this information to be shared with the breeding teams? So Team Uganda, were the breeders involved in the study? And will there be a mechanism for sharing with them?
For this study, breeders were not involved, but of course, after doing the write-up, it will be shared with them. Probably Basil and the others can add to that.
Okay. Anything else to add from Basil? Anyone else?
Yes, thank you.
Yes,
Our study is definitely going to be in the public domain. And for that reason, we think that breeders and other actors involved in the seed systems will find it probably more informative to use. And given that we come from different institutions, that will also be an avenue for further dissemination of our study findings in our respective institutions. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank all of you for participating in what's been a really interesting discussion. We have more questions that have not been answered, but we're going to move on. So it might be possible to answer some of those questions in writing. So we're going to hear now from James Legg. He's a plant virologist at ITA. He's also done a lot of groundbreaking work on ICT. So James, over to you.
Thank you very much. And thanks again to the Uganda team for that wonderful presentation. It's I feel a little guilty in that this one is going to be much less exciting, but nevertheless, this is going to be a presentation about next steps for the CG within roots, tubers, and bananas seed, and moving from RTB CG research program to the 1CG, put together by myself with Margaret McEwen and Ian Barker. So as many of you know, the CG is going through a reform process, and there are 33 initiatives that are being developed, which will start from the beginning of next year. One of these focuses on seed systems. It's called Seed Equal, and it's all about delivering genetic gains in farmers' fields. This is led by Ian Barker, who's I think is going to be talking later in this week, and also Shoba Venkatanagappa. So Ian from SIP and Shoba from IRI. Just a little bit of background. So this is part of the Genetic Innovations Action Area, which is all around breeding, new technology for breeding, and also seed systems. There are 6 initiatives, of which Seed Equal is one. It's all about trying to bring better returns on both the breeding efforts of the CG system as well as the NARS in the countries where the CG works. And there are primary focuses on genetic gain of crops in farmers' fields and varietal turnover. And in that sense, it was quite interesting to hear about the information that the previous Uganda study has talked about in terms of varietal turnover. It's been developed based on some previous work and consultations, particularly work done by a CG group called the Seed System Community of Excellence, and also the Crops to End Hunger Seeds Delivery Group. They produced a white paper, and this has essentially formed the basis for much of the proposal development work that's been done for Seed Equal. There is a major home for the tools of the RTB Toolbox within Seed Equal, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, with important aspects of capacity development. And Seed Equal is all about modernizing germplasm development and deployment, and building on some of the new initiatives that are coming into the CG system, which have been led by the Excellence in Breeding Program, and incorporating some of the ideas that are coming, not from business as usual within the CG system, but from the industry sector. And a premise that on which the development of Seed Equal is based, that's come from donors, is that we're very much underinvested in seeds. So Seed Equal, it's an initiative focusing on seed delivery, and there are 6 major components of that. These are called work packages, so WP work package, and you'll see that we have 3 that are focused on crop archetypes, so one on cereals, one on legumes, and one on vegetatively propagated crops. And this is the one that I'm leading together with Margaret McEwen. 3 of them are cross-cutting, one on coordination, one on policy, and one on equitable access and gender. So over the last 6 months or so, lots of colleagues have been working on the VPC's work package 3, and designing research outputs. And these are the research outputs that have been presented in the proposal, which was submitted at the end of September and is currently being reviewed. So you'll see we've got breeding pipelines, seed demand profiles. It was really interesting to hear about the 4-square means end chain analysis work that really fits within this, identifying demand. What do farmers need, and how does that differ between men and women? There'll be emphases on seed delivery pathworks and networks, on early generation seed technologies, on improving seed health, developing sustainable business models so that we can get farmers not just producing crops, but also selling seed. As Jeff mentioned, novel software applications such as Seed Tracker, and policy, providing the evidence for improved policy and regulations. Some of the key themes that we've considered in terms of prioritizing how we do the work within work package 3, which is vegetatively propagated crops. It's important for us to align with the other breeding initiatives of the Genetic Innovations Action Area. It's also important for us to align our work with what is called the regional integrated initiatives. So examples of this where we've got seed systems work are East and Southern Africa, West Central Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia. We're going to be building on extensive experience developed through RTB, and this is why it's wonderful to have all of this work going on in relation to the seed systems toolbox, which is one of the highlights of the RTB program. And it's it involves a global team. So we have a big concentration in Africa, but it's really drawing on the CG resources from Asia and Latin America too, as well as partners in the US and Europe and so on. A key area of interest for us has been strengthening seed systems within Africa, and we hope to have something called an Africa Center of Innovation for vegetably propagated crop seed systems. The idea with this is that it would draw on the skills and expertise that we'll have working within Work Package 3 from around the world, but it'll be Africa-based. And it will also link with something that's being developed by Agra with support from the Gates Foundation, which is a center of excellence for seed systems in Africa. That will primarily focus on cereals and grain legumes, but we're hoping that this center of innovation that will be delivered through Seed Equal will have a strong focus on vegetably propagated crops. Just to point out, I've illustrated there the toolbox in designing Work Package 3 of Seed Equal. These were identified as some of the most important methods that we'll be using to deliver the outputs and outcomes that are going to be achieved within Work Package 3 of Seed Equal. Now moving quickly to ideas around the African Center of Innovation for Vegetably Propagated Crop Seed Systems, which we're calling ACI-VSS for short. You'll see a vision there. The idea is to strengthen African economies through delivery of technologies and enhancing capacities that will drive the development of economically sustainable seed delivery systems for nutritious, resilient VPC crop varieties in Africa. Moving swiftly, just some of the ideas. This is really a concept in development. So none of this is set in stone. We have a preliminary concept note, but much remains to be developed. But some of the ideas that we're thinking about, it's going to be a platform for partnership. We hope that it will be self-financing in the long term, so that we'll devise a business model that will enable this to become something that is of value for VPC seed systems in Africa in the long term. A source of information, of tools, capacity development will be a key focus. It'll also be a convening center for the application of research, validation, and ultimately then for scaling, and also an innovation hub for some of the business ideas that we're generating around building seed enterprises. And a think tank for policy development, advocacy to build up seed systems. So this is a simple schematic that just illustrates the relations between the different elements that I've talked about. So this is the Seed Equal initiative within the 1CG, the Work Package 3 that focuses on vegetably propagated crops. And within that, there'll be space for an African Center of Innovation for vegetatively propagated crop seed systems. Now, we've been in consultation, particularly with our colleagues from the Gates Foundation, about how this might be supported initially. This is all very preliminary, but there is a thinking that as some of the existing large-scale seed system projects focusing on VPCs wind down, that it's possible that some of the support that has been channeled through those will be directed towards the Center of Innovation and will be consolidated cross-crop, but within the VPC's crop group to strengthen seed systems through the Center of Innovation. But we're also hoping in the weeks and months ahead that we'll be able to attract complementary support from other development investors. And as mentioned earlier, we hope ultimately that it'll be possible to develop a self-financing model for a component of this. It might not be for the whole thing, but at least for some elements of this Center of Innovation. Some of the technical components that have been envisaged, seed system tools, production strategies, quality assurance, building demand, enhancing demand, market intelligence, business models, policy, capacity development. But we're thinking that priority themes of this will be quite, focusing around innovation, but practical innovation, practical development strengthening of seed systems. So there'll be a strong component on tech development, business incubation. There'll also be a large capacity development component, which is why this workshop is particularly interesting. And there'll also be a component of scaling business, seed system business enterprises innovations, probably on a small scale, because it's not going to be possible to replicate some of the large scale seed system investments that have been running. But we think that scaling will be an important area of activity for the Center of Innovation. So some of the next steps that we're working on, we want to develop a shared vision for this Center of Innovation through a stakeholder consultation, which we hope to run in December. We're looking at how we can most effectively develop the Center of Innovation within the framework of Seed Equal. We're also interested to identify ways in which this can contribute in a complementary way to the work of other stakeholders and other institutions working in this area within Africa. As mentioned, financing, we need to get confirmation on how support will be gained and how that can be broadened, and how it can be supported through the 1CG. And ultimately, we're hoping to develop more detail on the what exactly the Center of Innovation will do, who will do it, where it will be done, roles and responsibilities, how it will be managed, how it will be governed, and again, how it might be supported in the longer term future with a self-sustaining model. So that's a little bit of a background on Seed Equal and the African Center of Innovation for VPC seed systems. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, James. That's really interesting. It's great to see how much thought is being put into the work for next year. It's very, very encouraging, and we'll all look forward to that. We'd also like to thank the team from Uganda for presenting, Lucy and Basil and Samuel and Evans, Emmanuel, and the others. Also wanted to say, James, people have been leaving some questions for you in the chat, so you might want to check those out. And we don't have time to answer them, but please feel free to answer those in writing if you would like. So thanks, Uganda. We'd like to also thank Vivian and Nicolina for joining us as well. We have recorded this this session, and it will be presented, or it will be on our website. You'll be able to watch it again. We'll also be writing a little like a proceedings volume. We did that for the last session, or for the last seminar as well in July. And before I forget, I want to point out that we have a special offer this time. Those of you in the audience who attend 4 of the 6 sessions will be eligible to receive, or will receive, a certificate of participation. And this will be, so there were 3 days, 3 sessions in July, and then there are 3 now in October, for a total of 6. So if you attend 4 of the 6 or more, you will receive a certificate of participation for attending this training course. I just wanted to add, please join us on Wednesday, this Wednesday, at the same time, when we'll hear from the Tanzania team. They will tell us about sweet potato seed systems. We'll also hear from Enrico Kulembaka of TARI, the Tanzania Agricultural Research Institute. We'll be joined by discussant Fetian Abai, who's a professor of crop science at Mekelle University in Ethiopia. And we'll hear from Lawrence Kent, who's a program officer at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So unless there are any other burning issues, thank you all for attending. And we'll see you back here on Wednesday, same time when we'll virtually visit Tanzania. Thanks so much.